Welcome to the Explainer. Today we're diving into the psychology behind personal moral growth, and we're going to be drawing from Father Benedict Gratial's fantastic work, Spiritual Passages. This is really a deep dive into how we change, why it's so darn difficult, and this is the cool part, how our failures can actually become our greatest assets. So let me ask you this. Have you ever decided, okay, that's it, I'm going to make a real change, live a more principled life, only to find that suddenly everything just feels way messier? Yeah, it's a really common experience. The start of this journey, what Groeschel calls the awakening, well, it often feels less like a peaceful sunrise and a lot more like a chaotic storm. And this swirl of contradictions is the starting point. You feel both stronger and somehow weaker, you're more aware of what's good, but you're also more tempted by what's not. Now, that's not a sign that you're failing. Actually, it's the very sign that the process of what we call moral integration has begun. It's a journey of really deep personal change. Okay, so if the journey kicks off in chaos, how in the world do we find our way? You can't just rely on your feelings, right? Because those can be incredibly deceptive and change from one hour to the next. What you need is a map, a solid, objective moral framework to guide you when your internal compass is just spinning out of control. Moral integration isn't some one-time decision you make. No, it's a process of becoming. It's all about constantly discovering new horizons, new challenges, and moving beyond that vague idea of, hey, basically I try, to a real, conscious effort to align your life with a standard that's bigger than you are. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. The biggest obstacles on this path? They usually aren't external things, like difficult people or tough circumstances. Nope. The real monsters, they are deeply psychological, and they're lurking right inside our own minds. Gratial points to two super powerful defense mechanisms that are just incredibly effective at derailing even the most sincere person. They're subtle, they're clever, and let's be honest, we all use them. And this slide just captures it perfectly, how we can trick ourselves. So you've got rationalization, that's the simple excuse. I had a terrible day, I totally deserve this. And then there's intellectualization, which is a bit more complex. That's when we use these elaborate arguments to justify something we know deep down is wrong. Groeschel calls these the trump cards in the devil's deck because, wow, are they effective at convincing us that wrong is right? So, okay, even with a map and knowing about these mental traps, we all stumble. We all fall. It's just part of it. Understanding the nature of that failure is the really critical next step. And here is a crucial point. Our deepest psychological wounds and weaknesses, what the psychologist Carl Jung famously called the shadow, are often the very ground where our moral mistakes take root. See, a moral failure isn't just some random choice. It often grows from the parts of our nature that are a little bit broken. A huge consequence of these failures is something called psychological guilt. Now, this is totally different from healthy remorse, which, motivates us to change. No, this is a crippling, self-destructive state of mind that just strips away all hope and, get this, can paradoxically push you right back into the very behavior you feel guilty about. It is a vicious cycle that spiritual traditions are all about healing, not just wishing away. Understanding these distinctions helps us navigate our own failures with a lot more wisdom. Not all wrongdoing is the same. An act done out of pure ignorance is different from one that's done out of a deep-seated compulsion, which is different, again, from a fully conscious, deliberate rejection of what is good. Our freedom and our awareness, they play a huge role. This brings us to a really powerful, practical question that just completely shifts your whole perspective on failure. It moves us out of a place of despair and into a place of action and, believe it or not, growth. Just think about that for a second. It's not, how do I beat myself up for my sins, or how do I pretend they never happened? No, it's, how do I use them? The goal here is to make our temptations and even our failures, to make them work for us as dynamic motivations for development. So here's the process in a nutshell. You have to be honest, totally honest, no excuses. Then you seek forgiveness and repent. You have to refuse to rationalize it away, and then, and this might be the most important part, you start over. And you just keep starting over. This practice, it turns a moment of what feels like a total failure into a stepping stone. It's a daily conversion. A key tool for breaking that cycle of guilt and failure is to bring it out into the light. Now, this isn't about public shaming, it's about the incredible psychological relief that comes from sharing the burden and opening your soul to forgiveness, which is just so hard to do when you're all alone with it. Just as Brother Roger of Taizé puts it here, it's about lifting a burden that is simply too heavy for one person to bear alone. When you externalize the failure, you rob it of a lot of its power. And all of this brings us to a fundamental truth about this journey of moral integration. It's not about reaching some perfect, static destination where you never, ever make a mistake again. I mean, that's a myth. The goal is the process itself. It's the constant effort, the daily starting over, the slow, steady purification of your intentions. I mean, even the most revered figures in Christianity weren't presented as these perfect specimens. They were dynamic, flawed works in progress, just like us. I love this quote because it really drives the point home. The failings of figures like Peter and Paul, they aren't edited out of their stories. Instead, they're shown as the necessary background for their spiritual journey. Their weaknesses, their mistakes, their anger, all of that became the raw material for their growth and for our encouragement too. And that's a thought worth sitting with for a minute. It suggests that our imperfections aren't just obstacles we need to overcome. What if they're the very fuel for the journey? Maybe the struggle itself, the constant getting back up after we fall, maybe that's the very thing that makes the journey authentic and ultimately transformative. And that's our explainer on the psychology of moral integration. Thanks for joining us.